The dawn broke slow and cruel over the parched grasslands of West Texas, painting the horizon in shades of rust and ash. A dry wind swept across the brittle earth, carrying with it the taste of alkali dust and the promise of another scorching day. The sun, still low in the sky, cast long shadows from the scattered mesquite trees and the occasional bleached bones of cattle that had succumbed to the unforgiving land. In the distance, the town of Redemption Creek squatted like a wounded animal against the landscape. It was a collection of weathered buildings that seemed to lean against each other for support. The general store with its warped boards, the livery stable that reared of horse sweat and old leather, and at the heart of it all, the Broken Wheel Saloon. The saloon's doors hung crooked on their hinges, and the paint on its sign had long since surrendered to the elements, leaving only ghost letters that spelled out its name. Inside the saloon, even at this early hour, prospectors and drifters nursed their whiskey, their faces carved deep with lines from sun and disappointment. They'd come seeking gold in the nearby hills, but most found only fool's gold and empty promises. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and the sour smell of spilled beer, creating a fog that seemed to trap men's dreams and hold them prisoner. Among the ramshackle houses on the edge of town stood a small cabin, more worn than most. Its walls bore the scars of neglect, and the roof sagged under the weight of too many years. This was the home of Margaret Maggie Thornton, though home was perhaps too generous a word for the structure that barely kept out the wind and rain. Maggie stood at the cracked window, her gray eyes watching the sun climb higher. At 19 she should have possessed the bloom of youth. But hardship had already begun to etch itself into her features. Her auburn hair, once her mother's pride, hung limp and dusty around her shoulders. Her dress, patched and repatched until the original fabric was barely visible, hung loose on her thin frame. 3 days had passed since they'd put her father in the ground. Samuel Thornton hadn't been a bad man, just an unlucky one. The drought had killed his crops. The cattle disease had taken his small herd, and the debts had piled up like tumbleweeds against a fence. In the end, it was the debts that killed him, or rather the men who came to collect them. Maggie touched the bruise on her cheek. A parting gift from Josiah Blackwood's men when they'd come to claim what was owed. Blackwood owned half the county and had his sights set on the other half. He was a man who collected debts with the same enthusiasm others collected scalps, and he showed about as much mercy. The townsfolk wanted nothing to do with the Thorntons now. Bad luck was contagious in a place like Redemption Creek. And associating with the daughter of a debtor was asking for trouble. When Maggie walked down Main Street, women pulled their children close, and men found urgent business elsewhere. She was a ghost before her time, invisible to all but those who wished her harm. As the day wore on, Maggie went about her meager chores, drawing water from the nearly dry well, tending to the scraggly garden that yielded more dust than vegetables, mending clothes that were more patches than original cloth. She moved through these tasks mechanically, her mind elsewhere, planning. She had to leave Redemption Creek. Had to find somewhere she could start fresh, away from the shadow of her father's debts and Blackwood's reach. Night fell like a heavy blanket over the Texas plains. The temperature dropped sharply, and Maggie built a small fire in the potbelly stove, using the last of her firewood. She'd have to gather more tomorrow if there was a tomorrow. She allowed herself a small portion of cornbread and beans, knowing she had to make her supplies last until she could figure out her next move. The sound came just after midnight. Horses moving fast. Too fast for honest folk at this hour. Maggie's heart hammered in her chest as she reached for her father's old rifle, but her hands found only empty air. They'd taken that, too, along with anything else of value. The door exploded inward, splinters of wood flying like shrapnel. 3 men burst through Blackwood's men, their faces flushed with drink and malice. Jake Morrison led them, a brute of a man with scarred knuckles and dead eyes. Behind him came the Harley brothers, Tom and William, cowboys who turned bad when the cattle work dried up. Well, Morrison slurred, his breath reeking of cheap whiskey. Little Maggie Thornton all alone. Your daddy ain't here to protect you now, is he? Maggie backed against the wall, her chin raised despite the fear coursing through her veins. Get out of my house. Tom Harley laughed. You sound like grinding glass. Your house girl. You don't own nothing. Not this house, not the land it sits on. Not even the clothes on your back. It all belongs to Mr. Blackwood. Now, my father's debts died with him, Maggie said, though she knew the words were hollow. In Redemption Creek, debts followed families like shadows. Morrison stepped closer, his massive frame blocking out the moonlight from the doorway. That's not how Mr. Blackwood sees it. He figures someone's got to pay. And since your daddy went and died on us, that leaves you. They moved fast for drunk men. William grabbed her arms while Tom produced a length of rope. Maggie fought like a wild cat, kicking and biting, but she might as well have been fighting the desert wind. Morrison's fist caught her in the stomach, driving the air from her lungs and the fight from her body. They dragged her out into the cold night, her bare feet scraping against rocks and thorns. The moon hung full and merciless overhead, bathing everything in silver light that made the world look like a photograph of itself. They threw her over Morrison's saddle like a sack of grain, and she tasted blood and leather and fear. They rode hard for what felt like hours but was probably less than one. The landscape changed from the scrub brush near town to true wilderness, a desolate stretch where only coyotes and vultures made their home. Finally, they stopped near a lone fence post, a wooden sentinel standing guard over nothing. "This will do," Morrison grunted, pulling Maggie down roughly. She hit the ground hard, feeling something in her wrist snap. The pain was sharp and immediate, but she swallowed her cry. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. They worked with practiced efficiency, binding her to the fence post with rope that bit into her skin. Her arms were pulled back around the post, her wrists tied so tight she could feel her fingers going numb. More rope around her ankles, her waist, her throat, not tight enough to strangle, just tight enough to make every breath a reminder of her helplessness. Tom Harley squatted down in front of her, his face a mask of cruel amusement. "You know what's funny? Your daddy begged just like this. Please give me more time. Please, I'll pay everything. But Mr. Blackwood don't give second chances." "You killed him," Maggie whispered. The truth she'd suspected confirmed. William shrugged. "He killed himself when he borrowed money he couldn't pay back. We just helped him along." Morrison mounted his horse, looking down at her with those dead eyes. "The cold will get you first, most likely, though the coyotes have been bold lately. What with a drought driving off their usual prey. Either way, come morning, won't be nothing left but bones and a warning to others who think they can cheat Josiah Blackwood." They left her there, their laughter fading into the distance along with the sound of hoof-beats. And then there was only silence, vast and complete, broken occasionally by the distant howl of a coyote or the rustle of some small creature in the brush. The moon climbed higher, its cold light making everything sharp and strange. Maggie tested her bonds, but the men had done their work well. The rope was new, strong, tied by hands that knew their business. Her wrist throbbed where she'd injured it in the fall, and she could feel the warmth of blood where the ropes had already begun to cut into her skin. The cold came creeping in like a living thing, starting with her bare feet and working its way up. The thin dress offered no protection against the night wind that cut through the fabric like it wasn't there. She began to shiver, her teeth chattering so hard she feared they might crack. This was how she would die. Then tied to a fence post in the middle of nowhere, food for scavengers, her bones bleached white by the sun. No one would come looking for her. No one would care. She would simply disappear. Another casualty of the harsh land and harsher men who ruled it. Time lost meaning in the darkness. The moon traced its path across the sky and Maggie drifted in and out of consciousness. The cold and pain blurring together into a single sensation of misery. She thought she heard her mother's voice singing the lullaby she used to sing when Maggie was small and afraid of thunderstorms. She thought she saw her father standing just beyond the edge of moonlight, beckoning her to follow. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to her suffering, and Maggie felt death settling over her like a shroud. She had stopped shivering, which she knew was a bad sign. The rope around her throat made each breath a struggle, and she found herself wondering if it would be better to just stop fighting, to let go and drift away on the cold wind. It was then, when the moon hung directly overhead like a silver eye, that she heard it, the sound of a horse moving slow and careful through the brush. The horse emerged from the shadows like a specter, its rider sitting tall despite the late hour. He was silhouetted against the stars, a figure carved from darkness itself. The man dismounted with fluid grace, his spurs making soft music against the hard ground. He moved without hurry, as if midnight rescues in the middle of nowhere were commonplace for him. Maggie tried to speak, but her throat was too dry, the rope too tight. Only a weak rasp emerged, barely louder than the wind through the sagebrush. The stranger approached slowly, and as he drew closer, the moonlight revealed more details. He wore a long duster coat, dust-covered and travel-worn, that swept nearly to his boots. A wide-brimmed hat cast his face in shadow, and a bandana covered the lower half of his features. What she could see of his eyes caught the moonlight like a wolf's. He stood before her for a long moment, taking in the scene. The girl tied to the post, the rope cutting into her flesh, the blood dried dark on her wrists. Then he reached into his coat and produced a knife, the blade gleaming silver in the moonlight. "Easy now," he said, his voice rough with disuse, like leather left too long in the sun. "This might hurt some." He started with the rope around her throat, sawing through it with careful precision. When it fell away, Maggie gasped, drawing in great gulps of cold air that burned her lungs. Next came the bonds around her wrists. As circulation returned to her hands, pain shot through them like lightning, and she bit her lip to keep from crying out. "No one deserves to be left like this," he said, working on the remaining ropes. His hands were steady, careful not to cut her skin further. No one. When the last rope fell away, Maggie tried to stand, but her legs buckled. She would have fallen if the stranger hadn't caught her. His arms strung around her waist. She leaned against him, too exhausted and pain-racked to care about propriety. He smelled of leather and gunpowder and something else. Sage maybe. Or the deep desert after rain. "Can you ride?" he asked. Maggie nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. But anything was better than staying here, waiting for death or worse. He helped her to his horse, a black mare that stood patient as stone. The saddle was worn but well-maintained with saddlebags that looked heavy with supplies. He lifted her up. She weighed nothing to him, apparently, and then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to take the res, creating a cage of warmth that made her realize just how cold she'd been. "Where?" she started, but her voice cracked. "Somewhere safe," he said, and spurred the horse into motion. They rode through the night, following paths that seemed invisible to Maggie's eyes, but clear as day to her rescuer. The stranger kept the pace steady but not punishing. Mindful perhaps of her injuries, Maggie found herself drifting in and out of consciousness, held in place by the stranger's solid presence behind her. The landscape changed gradually, the flat plains giving way to rolling hills dotted with juniper and pion. They crossed a shallow creek, the horse's hooves splashing through water that gleamed like mercury in the moonlight. On the far side, the stranger turned the horse up a narrow canyon that Maggie would have sworn wasn't there until they entered it. The canyon walls rose high on either side, blocking out most of the sky and leaving only a ribbon of stars visible overhead. They rode for perhaps another mile before the stranger reined in the horse near what looked like a shadow in the rock face. As they drew closer, Maggie realized it was a shallow cave, really more of a deep overhang, but it would provide shelter from the wind and any eyes that might be searching. He dismounted first, then helped her down. Her legs still felt like water, and she had to lean against the rock face to keep from falling. The stranger didn't comment, just went about the business of seeing to his horse, removing the saddle, rubbing her down with a handful of dry grass, checking her hooves for stones. Only when the mare was settled did he turn his attention back to Maggie. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a flat rock near the back of the overhang. "I'll get a fire going." "Won't they see the smoke?" Maggie asked, her voice still. "Not here. Canyon draws it up and scatters it. Learned that from the Apache." He worked efficiently, gathering dry wood from a pile someone, probably him, had left previously. Soon a small fire crackled to life, casting dancing shadows on the rock walls. The warmth was almost painful against Maggie's cold, numbed skin, but she moved closer anyway, holding her hands out to the flames. The stranger rummaged in his saddlebags and produced a canteen, a wrapped bundle that proved to be hardtack and dried beef and a small tin cup. He filled the cup with water and handed it to her. "Small sips," he warned. "Too much too fast and you'll be sick." The water was the best thing Maggie had ever tasted, even though it was warm and had a metallic tang from the canteen. She forced herself to drink slowly, though every instinct screamed at her to gulp it down. The stranger watched her with those wolf eyes, saying nothing. When she'd finished the water, he refilled the cup and set about making a simple meal. He soaked some of the hardtack in water to soften it and cut the dried beef into small pieces with the same knife he'd used to free her. It wasn't much, but to Maggie it looked like a feast. They ate in silence, the fire crackling between them. Now that the immediate danger was past, Maggie found herself studying her rescuer. He'd pulled the bandana down to eat, revealing a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. His face was weathered but not old. Maybe 30, maybe 35. Hard to tell with men who lived rough. There was a scar along his left cheekbone, white against his sun-darkened skin. "What's your name?" she asked finally. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Then folks call me Cole. Cole Matthews." The name sounded familiar, tugging at something in the back of Maggie's mind, but she couldn't place it. "I'm Maggie. Maggie Thornton. I know who you are." That brought her up short. "You do?" He nodded, poking at the fire with a stick. "Saw what happened to your father. Saw Blackwood's men riding out tonight, laughing about what they'd done." His jaw tightened. "Followed them." "What?" The question was out before she could stop it. "Why would you risk yourself for a stranger?" Cole looked at her, then really looked at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. Maybe because I know what it's like to be on the wrong side of men like Blackwood. Maybe because I was tired of riding past wrongs and doing nothing. He shrugged. Or maybe I just don't like seeing anyone tied up and left to die. They fell silent again. Maggie pulled her knees up to her chest, trying to conserve warmth despite the fire. Her wrists throbbed where the rope had cut into them, and her whole body ached from the rough treatment and the cold. But she was alive, and that was more than she'd expected an hour ago. You can't go back, Cole said suddenly. You know that, right? Blackwood won't let this go. He'll figure out you escaped and he'll come looking. Maggie nodded. She'd known it the moment the ropes fell away. I don't have anywhere else to go. Everyone's got somewhere else to go. Just a matter of finding it. And you? She asked. Where are you going? He smiled then. Just a slight upturn of his lips, but it transformed his face. Wherever the wind takes me. Been that way for a while now. The fire burned lower and Cole added more wood outside their shelter. Something howled. Coyote probably, or maybe wolf. The sound made Maggie shiver, remembering Morrison's words about the coyotes being bold. Cole noticed and moved closer, not touching but near enough that she could feel his warmth. You should sleep, he said. Long ride tomorrow. Tomorrow? Can't stay here. This is just a way station. Come dawn we need to be moving. Maggie wanted to ask where they would go, what would happen to her, but exhaustion was pulling at her like quicksand. Cole pulled a blanket from his saddlebags, worn but clean, and handed it to her. She wrapped it around herself gratefully, the wool scratchy but warm against her skin. What about you? She asked, seeing he had no other blanket. I'll keep watch. Sleep? She wanted to protest, but her body had other ideas. The warmth of the fire, the safety of shelter, the presence of someone who apparently meant her no harm. It all combined to drag her toward unconsciousness. She curled up on the sandy floor of the overhang, the blanket pulled tight around her. The last thing she saw before sleep took her was Cole sitting by the fire, his profile sharp against the flames. He'd pulled his rifle across his lap, and his eyes were focused on the darkness beyond their small circle of light. Guardian or captor, she still didn't know. But for now, in this moment, she was alive and warm and relatively safe. As she drifted off, she heard him speaking, so soft she might have imagined it. No one deserves to be left like that. No one. The fire crackled. The stars wheeled overhead. And somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new uncertainties. But tonight, rescued from death by a mysterious stranger, Maggie Thornton slept. Dawn came like fire across the desert, painting the canyon walls in shades of gold and crimson. Maggie woke to find Cole already up. The fire reduced to cold ashes. His horse saddled and ready. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years living on the trail. Every action purposeful, nothing wasted. Morning, he said, handing her a cup of coffee. It was bitter and strong enough to strip paint, but the warmth was welcome against the morning chill. You didn't wake me for a watch, she said, noting the shadows under his eyes. You needed the sleep more than I did. He was already packing up their meager camp, erasing signs of their presence with practiced ease. How are your wrists? Maggie looked down at the angry red marks circling her wrists like bracelets. They hurt, but not as badly as they had last night. I'll manage. He produced a small tin from his saddlebags and tossed it to her. So, Apache remedy. Smells like the devil's own breath, but it works. She opened the tin and immediately understood what he meant about the smell. But she applied it anyway, wincing as it stung before beginning to numb the pain while she tended to her wounds. Cole scattered the ashes of their fire and brushed away their tracks with a branch of sage. You're very careful, she observed. Careful is what keeps a man alive out here. He secured the last of his gear to the saddle. You ready to ride? They left the canyon as the sun cleared the horizon, emerging into a landscape transformed by daylight. What had been shadows and threats in the darkness now showed itself as harsh but beautiful country. Red rock mesas rising like ancient castles, valleys carpeted with silver-green sage, and in the distance, a line of mountains purple with morning haze. Cole kept them to the high ground when possible, following ridge lines and deer trails that kept them out of sight from below. Maggie rode behind him, her arms around his waist, trying not to think about how improper this all was. Propriety seemed a luxury she could no longer afford. Tell me about Blackwood, Cole said after they'd been riding for an hour. How'd your father come to owe him? Maggie hesitated, then figured she owed him at least that much. The drought started it. 3 years back the rains just stopped. The crops died. The cattle started dying. Papa tried to hold on. Kept thinking the next season would be better. He borrowed money from the bank first, But when they wouldn't lend any more, he went to Blackwood. Dangerous man to owe. Papa knew that, but he was desperate. Mama had taken sick consumption, and the medicine cost money we didn't have. Papa figured one good harvest would let him pay it all back. She felt the familiar tightness in her chest. Mama died. Anyway, and the rains never came. They rode in silence for a while after that. The sun climbed higher, the air growing hot and dry. Cole stopped periodically to rest the horse and check their back trail, his eyes scanning the horizon with the intensity of a hawk. It was during one of these stops in the shade of a massive boulder that he told her his own story, or part of it. Anyway, I used to work cattle, he said, letting the horse drink from a small spring that seeped from the rocks down near the border. Good outfit, honest work. Had a partner, man named James Garrett. We were saving up to buy our own spread. He paused, his eyes distant. There was a rancher lot like Blackwood. Thought he owned everything he could see and some he couldn't. Wanted our boss's land. Made an offer. Boss said no. Next thing we know, cattle are going missing. Water holes are poisoned. And then my partner's dead with a bullet in his back. And I'm standing over the body with a gun in my hand. His voice was flat, emotionless. But Maggie could see the tension in his shoulders. The rancher's men just happened to be riding by. Just happened to see me there. Funny how that works. But you didn't do it. He looked at her then. Something almost like surprise in his eyes. No, I didn't do it. But that doesn't matter much when the judge is in the rancher's pocket and the jury's made up of his friends. So you ran. So I ran. Been running for 2 years now. That's why I keep to the empty places. Why I'm careful. There's a price on my head from here to Mexico. Maggie digested this information. She was riding with a wanted man. A fugitive from justice or injustice, depending on how you looked at it. Yet she felt safer with him than she had in her own home. They resumed riding as the morning gave way to afternoon. The landscape began to change, the desert giving way to scattered pines and juniper. The air grew marginally cooler, carrying the scent of resin and earth. They were climbing, she realized, heading into the foothills of the mountains she'd seen that morning. Where are we going? She asked. There's a place I know, a town if you can call it that. Silver City. It's far enough from Blackwood's reach, and the folks there don't ask too many questions if you don't cause trouble. And after that he was quiet for a moment. That's up to you. I can get you somewhere safe, but after that I can't stay in one place too long. It's not safe for me or anyone with me. Maggie felt something twist in her chest at that. She'd known, of course, known from the moment he'd cut her free that this was temporary. He was a tumbleweed, blown by winds she couldn't see. She was just someone he'd happened to cross, a wrong he could right before moving on. They stopped for a midday meal in a grove of cottonwoods by a creek. The water was clear and cold, and Maggie drank deeply, then splashed some on her face and neck. She caught Cole watching her and felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. What? She asked. Nothing, just you're tougher than you look. I've had to be. I reckon that's true. He pulled out the hardtack and beef again, along with a can of peaches he'd been saving. Special occasion, he said at her questioning look. Not every day a man gets to play hero. Is that what you think you are? A hero? He considered that, using his knife to pry open the can. No. Heroes don't have prices on their heads. Heroes don't leave folks behind. He handed her a peach slice. I'm just a man who was in the right place at the right time. They shared the peaches in companionable silence. The sweet syrup a luxury after the dry food. Maggie found herself studying him again. The way his hands moved with such sureness. The way his eyes never stopped scanning their surroundings. The way the sun brought out red highlights in his dark hair. You're staring, he said without looking at her. Sorry, I don't understand you. Not much to understand. I see something wrong. I try to make it right. Simple as that. Nothing's ever that simple. He smiled. That small upturn of lips she'd seen last night. Maybe not, but it's a good lie to tell yourself. They were preparing to mount up again when Cole suddenly went still, his hand moving to his gun. Company, he murmured. Get behind those rocks. Maggie heard it then. Horses coming fast. She scrambled behind the cottonwoods, her heart hammering. Cole stood in the open, relaxed but ready, his hand resting casual like on his gun butt. 3 riders came into view and Maggie nearly cried out. It was them, Morrison and the Harley brothers, looking rough and mean and angry. They pulled up short when they saw Cole. Afternoon, Cole said pleasantly. As if they'd met at a church social. Morrison's eyes narrowed. You seen a girl? Auburn hair about ye high? It would have been on foot. Can't say I have. This girl do something wrong. That's none of your concern, stranger. Tom Harley's hand was inching toward his gun. Maybe not. Cole agreed. but I'm curious by nature. This girl dangerous. Should I be watching out for her? Morrison spat tobacco juice. She's a thief and a debtor. Stole from Mr. Josiah Blackwood himself. We're bringing her back to face justice. Justice. Cole seemed to taste the word. Funny thing about justice. Seems to look different depending on which end of the gun you're on. What's that supposed to mean? William Harley demanded. Nothing at all. Just making conversation. You boys look like you've been riding hard. Sure you got the right trail? Morrison's eyes narrowed further. What's your name? Stranger. Smith. John Smith. Common as dirt and twice as forgettable. Cole's smile didn't reach his eyes. I'm just passing through. Same as you. Haven't seen any girl, stolen goods or otherwise. The three men exchanged glances. Maggie held her breath, pressing herself against the rough bark of the cottonwood. One wrong word, one suspicious move, and bullets would start flying. Finally, Morrison nodded. If you do see her, there's a reward. $50 for information leading to her capture. I'll keep that in mind. They wheeled their horses around and rode off, but not before Tom Harley looked back, suspicion clear on his face. Cole stood motionless until the sound of hoofbeats faded, then moved quick as lightning. They'll be back, he said, helping Maggie from her hiding spot. Tom Harley's got a nose for lies. We need to move now. They mounted up and Cole spurred the horse into a groundying lope, leaving the cottonwoods and the creek behind. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as they rode, taking a circuitous route that would confuse any trackers. Maggie clung tight, aware of every place their bodies touched, aware too of the danger following them like a shadow. I'm sorry, she said into his back. I've brought you nothing but trouble. Haven't seen any trouble yet, he replied. Just three idiots who couldn't track a bleeding elephant through snow. Despite everything, Maggie found herself smiling. There was something about this man. This dangerous stranger who'd appeared like something out of a dime novel to rescue her. Something that made her feel safe and reckless all at once. The sun was beginning its descent when Cole finally slowed their pace. They'd put miles between them and the cottonwood grove, crossing their own trail twice and riding through streams to break their scent. The mountains loomed closer now, their peaks catching the afternoon light like crowns of gold. We'll make Silver City by nightfall. Cole said, once we're there you'll be safe for a while anyway. And you? I'll move on. Always do. Maggie felt that twist in her chest again, stronger this time. She'd known him less than a day. This outlaw with gentle hands and dangerous eyes. But already the thought of him leaving felt like a loss she wasn't prepared to face. The trail wound upward through stands of pine and aspen. The air grew cooler, sweeter somewhere in the distance. Maggie could hear the sound of rushing water. It was beautiful country, wild and free. Like him, she thought, like he was teaching her to be. As they rode toward Silver City and whatever uncertain future waited there, Maggie made a decision. She wouldn't be the frightened girl tied to a post anymore. She wouldn't be the victim of men like Blackwood and Morrison. Whatever came next, she would face it standing up. And if a small part of her hoped that Cole Matthews might stay longer than he planned, well, that was a secret she'd keep to herself for now. Silver City appeared just as the sun touched the mountain peaks. A collection of rough-hewn buildings clinging to the hillside like barnacles on a ship's hull. It was smaller than Redemption Creek, but there was a vitality to it that Maggie's hometown had lacked. Miners trudged down the main street, their clothes dusty with silver ore, while merchants hawked their wares from storefronts and wagons. The air rang with the sound of hammers on anvils, the creak of wagon wheels, and the multilingual chatter of a dozen different nationalities. Cole guided them to the blacksmith shop at the edge of town. A weathered building with smoke pouring from its chimney. The rhythmic clang of metal on metal ceased as they approached, and a giant of a man emerged, wiping soot-blackened hands on a leather apron. Well, I'll be damned, the blacksmith said, his face breaking into a grin. Cole Matthews thought you were steering clear of towns these days. Hello, Dutch. Cole said, dismounting and helping Maggie down. Need a favor? Dutch's eyes took in Maggie's disheveled appearance. The rope marks on her wrists. The way she stood close to Cole as if for protection. His expression darkened. Trouble? Some? Nothing that followed us here. The lady needs supplies, clothes, boots, whatever else. And I need information. Dutch nodded. Bring her inside. Martha, he bellowed toward the building. We got company. A woman emerged from the back of the shop. As round as Dutch was tall with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, but her eyes were kind as they assessed Maggie. Lord have mercy. Martha said, Child, you look like you've been dragged through hell backwards. Come with me. We'll get you sorted. Maggie looked at Cole, suddenly reluctant to leave his side. He nodded encouragingly. Go on. Martha will take care of you. Dutch and I need to talk. Martha led Maggie through the shop to their living quarters in the back. It was simple but clean, with checked curtains on the windows and a rag rug on the floor. She immediately set about heating water on the stove. First things first, Martha said briskly. You need a proper wash and some decent clothes. I've got some things that belong to my daughter. She's married now, living in California. Should fit you well enough. While Maggie washed away the dirt and dried blood of her ordeal, she could hear the low rumble of men's voices from the shop. Cole and Dutch discussing something serious by the tone. She caught her own name once or twice in Blackwoods. Martha had laid out clothes on the bed, a blue calico dress, sturdy but feminine, along with proper undergarments, stockings, and a pair of barely worn boots. After days in her torn, filthy dress, the clean clothes felt like armor. There now, Martha said when Maggie emerged. You look almost human again. Sit down and let me tend to those wrists. As Martha applied a healing salve that smelled of herbs and beeswax, she studied Maggie with shrewd eyes. Known Cole long? No, ma'am. Ye found me. Saved me. That sounds like Cole. Man's got a weakness for folks in trouble. Martha wrapped clean bandages around Maggie's wrists with practiced efficiency. Of course, usually it's stray dogs and broken-winged birds, not pretty young women. Maggie felt heat rise to her cheeks. It's not like that. He's just helping me get somewhere safe. Martha's tone was skeptical but not unkind. Well, whatever it is, you couldn't ask for a better man to have on your side. Cole Matthews is as straight as they come, despite what the wanted posters say. You know about that, child. Everyone knows. But folks here in Silver City, we judge a man by what we see, not what some corrupt judge says. Cole's helped more people than I can count. Never asks for anything in return. Neither. A sudden commotion from the street cut short their conversation. Shouts, the sound of running feet, and then gunshots. Sharp cracks that echoed off the mountain walls. Martha's face went pale. Stay here, she ordered. But Maggie was already moving toward the door. She found Cole and Dutch outside, both armed, watching as chaos erupted on Main Street. A group of masked riders had thundered into town, shooting into the air and shouting. As Maggie watched, they converged on the First National Bank of Silver City. Raiders, Dutch spat. Third time this month. Sheriff's nowhere to be found. As usual, Cole's jaw was tight. How many? 6, maybe 7. They'll clean out the bank and be gone before anyone can organize. Not this time, Cole said quietly. He checked his revolver, then looked at Dutch. You still keep that scatter gun under your counter, Cole? No, Dutch protested. This ain't your fight. It is now. He turned to Maggie. Get back inside. Lock the door. Cole, please. The single word was sharp with urgency. I can't do what needs doing if I'm worrying about you. She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. She nodded and retreated inside, Martha pulling her away from the window, but Maggie couldn't help watching through a gap in the curtains as Cole moved toward Main Street with the fluid grace of a hunting cat. What followed was like something out of the dime novels her mother used to hide from her father. Cole took position behind a water trough as the raiders began emerging from the bank, their saddlebags bulging with stolen money. The leader, a big man with a red bandana over his face, was shouting orders. Mount up, boys. We're rich. Not so fast, Cole called out, his voice carrying clear across the street. Was already moving, diving to the side as bullets splintered the wood where he'd been standing. His own gun spoke twice and 2 raiders went down, clutching wounds. The street erupted in gunfire. Cole moved from cover to cover, never staying still, each shot deliberate and telling. Dutch had joined the fight, his shotgun booming from the doorway of his shop. A few townsmen, emboldened by their stand, began firing from windows and doorways. It was over in minutes, though it felt like hours to Maggie. 4 raiders lay dead or dying in the street. 2 had managed to mount their horses, but were captured by angry miners before they could escape. The 7th had vanished in the chaos, leaving only a trail of blood. Cole stood in the middle of Main Street, reloading his gun with steady hands. There was a tear in his coat where a bullet had passed close, but he seemed unharmed. The townspeople began emerging from their hiding places, looking at him with a mixture of awe and gratitude. The bank's money, the bank manager stammered, gesturing to the scattered saddlebags. You saved it all. Just put it back where it belongs, Cole said. He turned to walk away, but the manager caught his arm. Wait, there's a reward. Keep it. Cole's voice was flat. Use it to hire a better sheriff. He strode back to the blacksmith's shop, the crowd parting before him. Maggie met him at the door, her heart still racing from what she'd witnessed. You could have been killed, she said. But I wasn't. He looked tired suddenly, the adrenaline fading. You okay? Me? You're the one who just took on 7 armed men. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. 6.5. That last one was already running. Dutch clapped him on the shoulder. That was damn fool heroics. Cole, also the bravest thing I've seen in years. It was necessary, Cole said simply. Town like this can't survive if it lets vultures pick it clean. As word spread about what had happened, people began arriving at the blacksmith's shop. They brought food, supplies, offers of lodging. The mayor himself appeared. A thin man with nervous hands, practically begging Cole to consider the position of sheriff. Town needs a man like you, the mayor said. Someone who will stand up to the lawless elements. The pay is good. Comes with a house. I appreciate the offer. Cole cut him off. But I can't stay. Got business elsewhere. Maggie felt that familiar twist in her chest. Of course he couldn't stay. A wanted man couldn't be a sheriff, no matter how much the town needed him. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across Silver City, the impromptu celebration began to wind down. Dutch and Martha insisted that Cole and Maggie stay the night, refusing to hear any argument. You're dead on your feet, Martha said firmly. Both of you and those raiders might have friends. Better to travel in daylight. They gathered around Martha's table for supper, beef stew and fresh bread. A feast after days of trail food. The conversation flowed easily. Dutch regaling them with tales of the town's early days while Martha fussed over everyone's plates. Cole saved Dutch's life once, Martha said suddenly, causing Cole to look up sharply. Did he tell you that, Martha? Hush, Cole. She should know what kind of man she's traveling with. Martha turned to Maggie. 2 winters back, Dutch was hauling supplies over the pass when his wagon went over, broke his leg. Something terrible. Cole happened along, rigged up a travois, and dragged him 10 through a blizzard to get help. Anyone would have done the same, Cole muttered. No, Dutch said quietly. They wouldn't have. Most would have taken what they could carry and left me to freeze. You nearly died yourself getting me back. An uncomfortable silence fell. Cole pushed his food around his plate, clearly unhappy being the center of attention. Maggie found herself studying him again. This complex man who ran from the law but couldn't pass by someone in trouble. After supper, Martha showed Maggie to a small room under the eaves. Colorado bed down in the shop. She said, Dutch will make sure he's comfortable. She paused at the door. That man cares about you. You know, I've known Cole Matthews for 3 years and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. He's just being kind. Kind. Yes, Cole's always kind, but this is different. Martha's eyes were knowing. Don't let him ride away without telling him how you feel. You might not get another chance. After Martha left, Maggie sat on the narrow bed, her mind whirling. Through the thin walls, she could hear the men talking below, their voices a low rumble. Tomorrow, Cole would take her somewhere safe and disappear back into the wilderness. The thought made her chest ache. Unable to sleep, she crept down the stairs and through the shop. She found Cole sitting outside on a bench, smoking a cigarette and watching the stars. He looked up as she approached but didn't seem surprised. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. She sat beside him, careful to leave a proper distance between them. Too much excitement. I guess it'll be quieter tomorrow. I know a boarding house in Tucson run by a widow woman. She'll give you work. Ask no questions. You can start fresh. And you? Mexico maybe. Or California. Somewhere the wanted posters haven't reached yet. They sat in silence, the night air cool against their skin. In the distance, a coyote howled, answered by another. The sound no longer frightened Maggie as it once had. Why do you do it? She asked suddenly. Help people. I mean, when it would be safer to just keep riding. Cole was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was soft. My partner James, he used to say that every man carries a weight. Some carry gold, some carry grudges, some carry guilt. The trick is knowing which weight's worth bearing. He took a last draw on his cigarette and ground it under his boot. I've got enough guilt for things I didn't do. Least I can do is try to balance the scales where I can. That's a hard way to live. Maybe, but it lets me sleep at night mostly. Maggie gathered her courage. What if you didn't have to carry it alone? He turned to look at her then, and in the moonlight, his eyes were unreadable. That's a dangerous thought, Maggie Thornton. Everything's dangerous out here. You taught me that. I also taught you to be smart about which dangers you court. Maybe I'm tired of being smart. Maybe I'm tired of being safe. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Maybe I want to know what it's like to really live, not just survive. He stood abruptly, pacing a few steps away. You don't know what you're saying. Life on the run, never staying anywhere long, always looking over your shoulder. That's no life for you. Shouldn't I get to decide that? Not when I'm the one who'd be dragging you into it. His voice was rough with emotion. You deserve better than that. Better than me. She stood too, moving close enough to see the conflict in his eyes. What if I don't want better? What if I want you? The words hung between them like a challenge. For a moment she thought he might walk away. Then his hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle as a whisper. You are the most dangerous thing I've encountered in 2 years of running, he said softly. What? Because you make me want to stop. The morning brought a change in the air. Clouds gathering over the mountains like a congregation of ravens. Cole studied the sky with a frown as he saddled his horse. The black mare dancing nervously as the wind picked up. Storm coming, Dutch observed, joining him in the stable. Could be a bad one. Maybe you should wait it out. Can't. Cole tightened the cinch. His movements efficient despite his obvious reluctance. Those raiders had friends. Someone got away to tell the tale. Town's about to have more trouble than it can handle. All the more reason to stay. Help us fight. My being here will only make it worse. You know that. Dutch sighed, recognizing the truth in the words. A wanted man defending a town was one thing. A wanted man taking up residence was another. It would bring bounty hunters, federal marshals, the kind of attention Silver City couldn't afford. Maggie appeared in the doorway wearing the blue calico dress, her hair neatly braided, looking every inch the respectable young woman. Only the determined set of her jaw suggested otherwise. I'm ready, she announced. Cole's expression was carefully neutral. We'll make good time if we leave now. Beat the storm to lower ground. They said their goodbyes to Dutch and Martha, who pressed a bundle of food into Maggie's hands along with motherly advice about staying safe. Martha pulled Cole aside for a moment, speaking low and urgent. He nodded once, his face grim. The ride out of Silver City was silent, the only sounds the clop of hooves and the increasingly insistent wind. They headed north and east, following a narrow trail that wound through stands of ponderosa pine. The trees swayed and groaned overhead, their needles hissing like angry snakes. They'd gone perhaps 5 miles when Cole suddenly reined in. His head cocked to one side. Riders, he said quietly. Coming fast. Before Maggie could respond, he'd guided them off the trail and into a thick stand of pines. They dismounted, Cole's hand on his gun, his body tense as a drawn bowstring. The riders came into view moments later. A group of hard-looking men led by someone Maggie recognized with a sick lurch of her stomach. Tom Harley, his face set in lines of determination, accompanied by half a dozen others she didn't know. They must have tracked us from the cottonwoods. Cole murmured, Damn, I thought we'd lost them. The riders passed without seeing them, but Cole didn't relax. They're heading for Silver City, looking for us there. Dutch and Martha can handle themselves, but we need to move. They'll double back when they don't find us. They remounted and Cole led them off the trail entirely, picking their way through the forest floor thick with pine needles. The storm was building now, the sky dark as evening, though it was barely noon. The first fat drops of rain began to fall, cold as ice. They climbed higher into the mountains. The terrain growing increasingly rough, the rain turned into a steady downpour, soaking through their clothes and making the ground treacherous. Maggie clung to Cole, shivering as the temperature dropped. Thunder crashed overhead. So loud it made the horse shy. Lightning illuminated the forest in stark, terrifying flashes. In one such flash, Maggie saw movement to their left. Riders pushing through the trees. They found us, she gasped. Cole spurred the horse forward just as a shot rang out, the bullet whining past their heads. More shots followed. Muzzle flashes bright in the storm-darkened woods. Cole rode like a madman, weaving between trees, branches whipping at them as they passed. They burst out of the trees onto a high meadow. The rain driving sideways now in sheets. Behind them, shouts and more gunfire. Cole's horse was laboring, carrying double weight over rough ground. There, Cole pointed to a cluster of rocks ahead. Hold on. They reached the rocks just as their pursuers cleared the tree line. Cole pulled Maggie from the saddle and pushed her behind cover, then slapped the horse's rump, sending it running. He dove behind the rocks as bullets sparked off stone. How many? Maggie asked, her voice barely audible over the storm. Too many? Cole checked his ammunition. But this position's good. They'll have to come at us across open ground. What followed was a siege in miniature. The raiders tried to flank them twice, only to be driven back by Cole's deadly accurate fire, but their ammunition wouldn't last forever and they both knew it. Cole, Maggie said during a lull. Give me your backup gun. He looked at her, rain streaming down his face. You ever shot anyone? No, but I'd rather die fighting than tied to another post. He handed her the weapon without further argument. Wait until they're close. Aim for the center. Squeeze. Don't jerk. The storm reached its peak. Thunder and lightning creating an apocalyptic backdrop to their stand. Then suddenly Tom Harley's voice rang out. Matthews, we know who you are. There's a $1,000 bounty on your head. Add that to what Blackwood's paying for the girl. And we're looking at a good payday. But we're reasonable men. Give us the girl and you can ride away. Interesting offer. Cole called back. Here's mine. You turn around and ride away and I don't put bullets in any more of your men. You're outnumbered 6-1. I faced worse odds. There was a consultation among the raiders. Voices raised in argument. Then Tom Harley stood up from cover. His hands raised. What if we make a deal? The girl comes with us but we give you our word she won't be harmed. Blackwood just wants to talk to her like he talked to her father. Cole's voice was ice. The man you helped murder. That was business. This doesn't have to end in blood. Maggie grabbed Cole's arm. Maybe. No. His voice was flat. Final. They're lying. Soon as they have you, we're both dead. Then what do we do? Cole looked at her, something shifting in his eyes. Do you trust me? Yes. Then when I give the word, you run north through that gap in the rocks. Don't stop. Don't look back. I'm not leaving you. You will if I tell you to. His hand cuffed her face briefly. Please, Maggie, let me do this right before she could respond. He was moving. He burst from cover, firing as he ran, drawing their fire away from her position. Now he shouted. Every instinct screamed at her to stay. But she ran through the gap in the rocks into the teeth of the storm. Behind her, gunfire erupted, terrible in its intensity. She stumbled, fell, picked herself up, and kept running. The forest closed around her, dark and confusing in the storm. She had no idea where she was going, only that she had to keep moving. Rain blinded her. Branches tore at her dress and skin. Thunder drowned out any sounds of pursuit. She didn't know how long she ran. Time lost meaning in the storm's fury. Finally, exhausted and lost, she took shelter beneath a massive pine, its low branches creating a small dry space. She huddled there. Cole's backup gun clutched in her hands and listened to the storm rage. Gradually, the thunder moved off, the rain slackening to a drizzle. The forest was silent except for the drip of water from branches. No birds, no animals, no sound of horses or men, no sound of Cole. She waited until she couldn't stand it anymore. Then began making her way back. It was slow going. She'd run without thought to direction, and everything looked different in the storm's aftermath. But eventually she found the meadow, the cluster of rocks. Bodies lay scattered across the grass. Tom Harley face up with the rain pooling in his open eyes. Two others she didn't recognize. Her heart hammered as she searched among them. But Cole wasn't there. She found blood, though a trail of it leading into the forest. She followed it, fear and hope wearing in her chest. The trail led to a shallow cave formed by two massive boulders leaning together. Cole was there, slumped against the rock wall. His shirt dark with blood, his gun lay beside him, and his face was pale as paper, but his eyes opened when she entered. Told you to keep running. He managed. And I told you I'm tired of being smart. She knelt beside him, hands shaking as she examined the wound. The bullet had taken him high in the chest, just below the collarbone. Bad, but maybe not fatal if she could stop the bleeding. Others dead. At least 3, maybe more. She tore strips from her petticoat, wadding them against the wound. This is going to hurt. Already hurts. She bound the makeshift bandage tight, trying to remember everything her mother had taught her about tending wounds. Cole's breathing was labored but steady, and the bleeding seemed to slow. We need help, she said. A doctor can't go to town. They'll be watching. Then what? He was quiet for a moment, gathering strength. There's an old woman lives up the mountain. Ella Rodriguez. She knows healing. Apache taught her. How far? Half-day's ride. Maybe more. Follow the creek upstream. Look for 3 white rocks in a line. Trail starts there. I'll go get her. No. His hand caught hers. Surprisingly strong. Too dangerous alone. Help me up. We go together. Cole, you can barely breathe. Together, he insisted. Or not at all, she wanted to argue, but saw the determination in his eyes. This man who'd saved her, who'd risked everything for a stranger. She wouldn't fail him now. All right, she said. Together. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and sharp with the scent of pine and wet earth. Somewhere in the forest, a bird began to sing. Tentative but hopeful. They would face whatever came next the same way. Tentative but hopeful. And together Maggie helped Cole to his feet, taking most of his weight. They stood there for a moment, gathering strength for the journey ahead. She thought of all that had happened since that night tied to the fence post. Fear and flight, kindness and violence, and something growing between them that neither had expected. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For everything." He managed a ghost of his usual smile. "Haven't made it yet. We will." She adjusted his arm around her shoulders, her own arm strong around his waist. "I'm too stubborn to let you die on me now." They emerged from the cave into a world washed clean by the storm. The sun was breaking through the clouds, turning the water droplets on every surface into diamonds. It would be a hard journey, dangerous and uncertain, but they would make it. They had to. They found Ella Rodriguez's cabin just as the sun was setting, painting the mountain peaks in shades of copper and gold. The dwelling sat in a small clearing, smoke rising from its chimney like incense toward heaven. Gardens surrounded it, wild and cultivated plants growing together in organized chaos. Maggie was nearly carrying Cole by then, his weight heavy against her side, his breathing shallow and labored. The journey had taken everything from both of them, following the creek, finding the 3 white stones, then climbing a trail that was barely more than a deer path through dense forest. The door opened before they reached it. An old woman stood there, her face a map of wrinkles, her dark eyes sharp as obsidian. She took in Cole's condition with one glance and stepped aside. "Bring him in," she said simply. "Quickly now." The cabin's interior was dim and fragrant with herbs. Bundles of plants hung from the rafters, and shelves lined the walls, filled with jars and bottles of mysterious contents. Ella directed Maggie to lay Cole on a narrow bed near the fire. "You are the one who rides with death at his heels," Ella said to Cole, her gnarled fingers already working at his blood-stained shirt. "I have heard of you. Seems everyone has," Cole managed. Ella examined the wound with practiced efficiency. "The bullet is still inside. It must come out." She turned to Maggie. "You will help. Heat water. Gather the bottles I point to. And child, be strong. This will not be pleasant." What followed was indeed not pleasant. Ella worked with tools that looked ancient. Her movements sure despite her age. Cole bit down on a leather strap. His body rigid with pain, sweat beading on his forehead. Maggie held him down when Ella instructed, cleaned blood when needed, and tried not to let him see her tears. Finally, Ella held up a misshapen piece of lead. Good. No vital organs touched, though he has lost much blood. She packed the wound with a pus that smelled of pine sap and something earthier, then bound it with clean cloth. "He will live?" Maggie asked. "If fever does not take him, if the wound does not fester, if his enemies do not find him," Ella shrugged. "Many ifs, but he is strong in you." She studied Maggie with those penetrating eyes. "You give him reason to fight." Cole had passed out during the procedure. Ella prepared a tea from various herbs and they managed to get some down his throat. Then she showed Maggie to a chair by the bed. "You will watch him tonight. If fever comes, cool him with wet cloths. If he wakes, give him more tea. I will rest now. These old bones are not what they were." Maggie kept vigil through the night. Cole's sleep was restless, punctuated by moments of delirium where he called out names. James, his murdered partner, and once heartbreakingly clear her own name. She cooled his fever, held his hand, and whispered prayers half remembered from childhood. Near dawn, she dozed in the chair, only to wake when a hand touched her arm. Cole was looking at her, his eyes clearer than they'd been since the shooting. "You stayed," he said, voice rough. "Where else would I go?" A ghost of a smile. "Tucson. That boarding house. Safe. I told you I was tired of being safe." He studied her face in the dim light. "This isn't the life I wanted for you. Maybe it's the life I want for myself." Before he could respond, Ella appeared with more of her medicinal tea. "Good. The fever breaks, but you must rest. Ill. No travel for many days." "Can't stay," Cole protested. "Bringing danger to your door." Ella made a dismissive sound. "You think I fear men with guns? I have lived on this mountain for 30 years. The Apache could not move me. The Mexican army could not move me. Some hired killers." She spat into the fire. "Let them come." Over the following days, a routine developed. Cole slept much, his body working to heal. Maggie helped Ella with her garden and her medicines, learning the properties of various plants. The old woman was a font of knowledge, teaching not just about herbs, but about survival, about reading weather and tracking animals, about being strong in a world that showed little mercy to women. "You love him," Ella observed one afternoon as they harvested wild onions. Maggie's hands stilled. "I barely know him. The heart does not count days. It knows what it knows." Ella's eyes were kind. "But love is not always enough. His path is dangerous." "I know. Do you really? To be always running, never resting. To bear children on the trail, to bury them perhaps in unmarked graves. To grow old before your time if you grow old at all. Maggie met her gaze steadily. My father tried to give me safety. He borrowed money we couldn't repay. Worked himself to death trying to provide security. And where did it lead? My mother dead of consumption. Him murdered by creditors. Me tied to a post to die. Safety is an illusion. Ella nodded slowly. Perhaps you are stronger than you look. You will need to be. On the fourth day, Cole was able to sit up, then stand. On the fifth, he insisted on walking outside, leaning heavily on Maggie. They sat on a bench Ella had carved from a fallen log, watching the sunset over the valleys below. It's beautiful here, Maggie said. It is. Cole was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about what you said about choosing your own path. Her heart beat faster. And Maggie, I'm a wanted man. That won't change. Every day with me is a day you could end up dead or worse. I've got no right to ask you to share that burden. You're not asking. I'm offering. He turned to look at her fully. What? Help me understand why a woman like you would choose a life like this. She considered her words carefully. That night, tied to the post, I thought I was going to die. And my biggest regret wasn't the things I'd done. It was all the things I hadn't. The chances I hadn't taken. The life I hadn't lived. I'd been so focused on being proper, being safe, being what everyone expected. And for what? She took his hand, careful of his injuries. You saved my life. Yes, but more than that, you showed me what it means to really live, to make choices based on what's right, not what's safe. To help people even when it costs you. I don't want to go back to that small, frightened existence. Not when I could have. His thumb stroked over her knuckles. A life of danger and uncertainty. A life of purpose, of freedom, she took a breath. Of you if you'll have me. He was silent for so long she feared she'd said too much. Then he lifted their joined hands and pressed his lips to her fingers. You humble me, Maggie Thornton. I'm not worth such devotion. Let me be the judge of that stubborn woman. You have no idea. That night brought news that changed everything. A rider appeared at Ella's cabin just after dark. Dutch from Silver City. His horse lathered with sweat. Maggie's heart sank, fearing the worst. Cole, Dutch said without preamble. You need to know. Blackwood's dead. Cole straightened, wincing at the movement. Dead. Oh. Shot in his own home 3 nights ago. Word is some of his own men turned on him. Man makes too many enemies. Eventually they joined forces. Dutch's expression was grim but satisfied. But that's not all. The federal marshal in Tucson, man named Walsh, he's been investigating Blackwood's operations, found evidence of jury tampering, bribed judges, false witnesses, including he paused meaningfully. The case against a certain Cole Matthews. Maggie felt Cole go very still beside her. What are you saying? I'm saying Walsh wants to talk to you. Says if you come involuntary, like tell what you know about Blackwood's operations. He might concede about clearing your name. The real killer of your partner confessed on his deathbed. One of Blackwood's men trying to clear his conscience. The silence stretched out. Heavy with possibility. A chance at redemption. At a life without running but also risk, trusting the law that had failed him before. It could be a trap, Maggie said. Could be, Dutch agreed. But Walsh has a reputation for being straight. And with Blackwood dead, his influence dies with him. Cole looked at Maggie, a question in his eyes. She squeezed his hand. Whatever you decide, we face it together. Together, he repeated softly. Then to Dutch, tell who Walsh shall come, but not until I'm healed enough to ride proper and not alone. Dutch nodded, understanding. I'll pass the word. Be careful, friend. Blackwood may be dead, but he's got kin who might seek revenge. That Harley who escaped the mountain fight, William, he's been making threats in the saloons. After Dutch left, they sat in the darkness, processing this turn of events. The future, which had seemed set in stone, a life of running, of looking over shoulders, suddenly held other possibilities. Are you sure? Maggie asked, trusting the law again. No, but I'm tired, Maggie. Tired of running? Tired of being someone else's idea of guilty? If there's a chance, he trailed off. Then we take it. She finished. Like I said, together. Ella emerged from the cabin with a knowing look. So the wheel turns. The runner thinks of stopping. The caged bird considers freedom good. She handed Maggie a small leather pouch. Healing herbs. You will need them. The body heals faster than the soul. 2 days later they prepared to leave. Cole was still weak but determined. Ella had procured horses, how she wouldn't say, and supplies for the journey. As they mounted up, the old woman pulled Maggie aside. Remember what I taught you, she said. About plants? Yes, but more. About being strong, about choosing your battles, about knowing when to fight and when to heal. She pressed something into Maggie's hand, a small silver medallion on a leather cord, for protection and for wisdom. They rode down from the mountain as the morning sun painted the world gold. Cole sat straighter in the saddle with each mile, his strength returning. They didn't push hard, mindful of his healing wound, but they made steady progress. That night, camped under a canopy of stars, they finally spoke of the future. If this works, Cole said. If my name is cleared, what then? What do you want? Maggie asked. I used to dream about that ranch. Small place. Nothing fancy. Cattle, horses, honest work. He looked at her across the fire. But dreams change now. When I think about the future, you're in it. Her heart swelled. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. Even if this goes bad, if Walsh is lying and I end up in prison or worse, even then. She moved around the fire to sit beside him. I told you. I chose this. Chose you. That doesn't change based on what some marshal says. He pulled her close with his good arm. How did I get so lucky? Lucky? You were shot, remember? Worth it, he said simply. To find you, worth everything under the vast desert sky. With an uncertain future ahead, but certainty in each other. They shared a kiss that tasted of promises and possibilities. Whatever came next, redemption or continued flight, safety or danger, they would face it as they had everything else since that night at the Fencepost. Together, Redemption Creek looked smaller than Maggie remembered. Its weathered buildings huddled against the desert like a bad memory. They approached from the east, the morning sun at their backs, casting long shadows down Main Street. Cole rode tall despite his healing wound, his hand never far from his gun. Maggie rode beside him. Ella's medallion cool against her throat. The town was too quiet. No miners heading to work. No merchants opening their shops. Even the saloon doors hung still. Cole pulled up at the edge of town, his instincts screaming danger. Something's wrong, he murmured. Then they saw him. William Harley stepped out of the saloon, flanked by 8 men, hired guns by the look of them, faces hard as flint and hands hovering near their weapons. Harley's arm was in a sling from their mountain fight, but his eyes burned with hatred. Matthews, he called out. Heard you were coming back. Couldn't believe you'd be that stupid, William. Cole's voice was steady. Sorry about your brother. Sorry. Harley spat in the dust. You killed Tom. Shot him down like a dog. Your brother was trying to kill us. Man makes that choice. He accepts the consequences. Like you're about to. Harley smiled, ugly and triumphant. See, Blackwood may be dead, but his son isn't. Junior's offering $2,000 for your head. Double if the girl comes with it. The hired guns spread out, forming a loose semicircle. Cole's horse shifted nervously. Sensing the tension, Maggie's hand found the gun Cole had given her, though she knew they were vastly outnumbered. You hear that, boys? Harley continued, $4,000 standing right there. All we got to do is take it. That's when the doors of the general store opened and Marshal Walsh stepped out. He was a tall man, lean as a fence post with intelligent gray eyes and a face that might have been carved from granite. 2 deputy marshals flanked him, rifles held casual but ready. Morning, Harley, Walsh said pleasantly. Gentlemen, fine day for a ride. I suggest you take one out of town now. Harley's face darkened. This ain't federal business, Marshal. Murder is always my business. And I've got paper on half your friends here, Roberts, isn't it? He nodded to one of the gunmen. Still wanted in Kansas, I believe. And you, Mr. Deacon, that bank job in Amarillo? Yes, I think this is very much my business. The gunmen exchanged uneasy glances. Fighting 2 people was one thing. Fighting federal marshals was another entirely. You're protecting a killer, Harley protested. I'm protecting a witness who's agreed to testify about Josiah Blackwood's criminal empire. Anyone who interferes with that testimony will answer to federal law. Walsh's hand rested on his pistol. Your choice, gentlemen. Ride out vertical or horizontal. Makes no difference to me. For a moment, violence trembled in the air like heat shimmer. Then one of the gunmen turned his horse. This ain't worth dying for, he muttered. Others followed. The promise of gold not quite outweighing the certainty of federal justice. Harley was left with only 3 men. Odds that weren't nearly as favorable. He glared at Cole with naked hatred. This isn't over. Yes, Walsh said quietly. It is. Next time I see you in this town, Harley, I'll arrest you for conspiracy to commit murder. That's 10 years hard labor minimum. Harley wheeled his horse around and galloped off, his remaining men following. Only when the dust settled did Walsh approach Cole and Maggie. Mr. Matthews, Miss Thornon, welcome back to Redemption Creek. He touched his hat brim politely. Shall we talk somewhere more private? They convened in the back room of the general store, which Walsh had commandeered as a temporary office. Maps and documents covered a table. Evidence of the investigation into Blackwood's operations. Walsh poured coffee from a battered pot, then got straight to business. I've been investigating Josiah Blackwood for 3 years, he began. The man corrupted everything he touched. Judges, sheriffs, witnesses. Your case, Mr. Matthews, was just one of many where he perverted justice for his own ends. He produced a document from the stack. This is a sworn confession from one Jake Morrison given on his deathbed. He admits to killing your partner, James Garrett, on Blackwood's orders. The goal was to acquire your employer's land by framing you for murder. Cole's jaw tightened. Morrison, he's the one who tied up Maggie. Was he died 2 days ago? Seems someone put a knife between his ribs in a saloon fight. Lived just long enough to clear his conscience. Walsh's expression suggested he had opinions about that convenient timing. The point is, with this confession and the evidence we've gathered, I can petition for a full pardon. Your name can be cleared. What's the catch? Maggie asked. Walsh smiled slightly. Smart woman. The catch is I need testimony about Blackwood's operations. Everything you know. Everyone involved. It won't be safe. Blackwood had associates across 3 states. But it's the only way to clean out this corruption completely. Cole was quiet for a long moment. And if I refuse, then you remain a wanted man. I won't arrest you today. Professional courtesy for coming in voluntarily, but I can't guarantee the next lawman you meet will be as understanding. I need to think about it. Fair enough. I'll be in town for 3 days. That's all the time I can give you. Walsh stood. There's something else. Blackwood kept detailed records. Seems he didn't trust his associates any more than they trusted him. Your father's debts, Miss Thornton. According to these papers, they were paid in full 2 months before his death. Blackwood just never told him. Maggie felt the blood drain from her face. What? Your father sold a mining claim to cover the debt. Blackwood pocketed the money and kept demanding payment. When your father couldn't pay what he didn't owe, Blackwood had him killed. Walsh's expression was sympathetic. I'm sorry. If it helps, Blackwood's estate will be liquidated to pay restitution to his victims. You'll receive what's owed. They left the store in a daze. The town was coming alive now. People emerging cautiously as word spread that the confrontation was over. Some nodded to Cole and Maggie. Others turned away. The weight of the past hung heavy in the air. They took rooms at the hotel, separate ones for propriety's sake. Though the desk clerk's knowing look suggested the gesture was wasted, Cole needed rest, his wound still tender, and Maggie needed time to process everything she'd learned. That evening she found him on the hotel's porch, watching the sun set over the desert. She sat beside him, their shoulders touching. My father died for nothing, she said quietly. A debt that was already paid. I'm sorry. Are you going to do it? Testify? Cole sighed. If I do, it means months of trials, depositions, staying in one place, being a target. But if I don't, you remain a fugitive forever. Yeah. He looked at her. This isn't what you signed up for. I signed up for you. Whatever that means. She took his hand. But Cole, this is your chance, our chance to have that life you dreamed about. The ranch, the honest work together if you'll have me. He lifted their joined hands and kissed her fingers, just as he had on Ella's mountain. There's nothing I want more. But Maggie, this won't be easy. Even with a pardon, there will always be people who remember, who judge. Can you live with that? I've been judged all my life for being poor, for being my father's daughter, for choices I didn't make. She met his eyes steadily. Let them judge. They don't know what we've survived. That night, a storm rolled in from the mountains, bringing blessed rain to the parched earth. Maggie stood at her window, watching lightning illuminate the desert in stark, beautiful flashes. A soft knock came at her door. Cole stood there looking uncertain. Couldn't sleep. The storm. She stepped aside to let him in. They sat by the window, watching nature's violence transform the landscape. The rain hammered down, washing the dust from the buildings, turning the streets to mud. I've decided, he said suddenly. I'll testify. Relief flooded through her. Really? I'm tired of running. Tired of being someone else's version of who I am. He turned to her. But I need to know you're sure. Once we start this, there's no going back. You'll be the woman who stood by the outlaw. That reputation will follow you. Then they'll know I'm the woman who stands by what she believes in. She moved closer. Cold that night tied to the fence post. I thought my life was over. In a way, it was my old life. The life of being afraid of letting others decide my worth. You didn't just cut those ropes. You freed me in ways I'm still discovering. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face. Maggie, I love you, she said simply. Whatever comes next, that won't change. He pulled her into his arms, then kissing her with all the desperation and hope of their journey. The storm raged outside, but here in this moment, they'd found shelter in each other. Morning brought clear skies and decision. They met Walsh at the general store where Cole signed the papers agreeing to testify. The marshal shook his hand solemnly. You're doing the right thing, Matthews. It won't be easy, but it's right. What happens now? Maggie asked. Now we prepare. The first trial is in Tucson in 2 weeks. We'll provide protection. Lodging. It could take months to work through all the cases. Walsh paused. There's a cottage on the edge of town. Belongs to the federal government. You're welcome to use it. Safer than the hotel. As they walked through Redemption Creek, Maggie noticed the changes. Morrison's death and Blackwood's fall had shifted the balance of power. The saloon was under new management. The corrupt sheriff had fled. It was still a hard town. But perhaps now it had a chance at living up to its name. They stopped at the cemetery where her father was buried. Someone, she never learned who, had placed fresh flowers on the grave. She knelt in the dust, finally able to mourn properly. He wasn't perfect, she said softly. But he tried. He loved us and he tried. Cole's hand rested on her shoulder, warm and steady. That's all any of us can do. That afternoon, word came that William Harley and his men had been arrested 20 miles south, caught robbing a stage. The last immediate threat was gone, though they both knew others might come. As the sun set, they stood outside the cottage Walsh had mentioned. It was small but clean, with a garden plot and a view of the mountains, a place to rest, to heal, to plan for whatever came next. It's not much, Cole said. It's perfect. Maggie turned to him. Do you know what today is? He thought. Tuesday. It's been exactly 1 week since you cut me free from that fence post. Feels like a lifetime. Yes, she agreed. A whole lifetime. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they entered their temporary home together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, testimonies to prepare, threats to face, a future to build. But tonight they were simply Cole and Maggie. Two souls who'd found each other in the wilderness and chosen to face the world together. The desert night was full of sounds. Coyotes calling, wind through the sage. The distant music from the saloon. But inside the cottage there was peace. They'd fought for it, bled for it, earned it with courage and trust and love. And whatever tomorrow brought, they'd face it the same way together. The trial stretched through autumn into winter. A parade of corruption laid bare in Tucson's federal courthouse. Cole testified with quiet conviction, detailing everything he'd witnessed about Blackwood's operations. Each day brought new threats, anonymous letters, shadows following them through town. Once a brick through their cottage window, but Marshal Walsh's protection held firm, and gradually, the empire Blackwood had built began to crumble. Maggie attended every session. Her presence a steady anchor for Cole. She watched him transform on the witness stand from hunted outlaw to instrument of justice. The truth so long suppressed poured out like water breaking through a dam. Between trials they built a life of sorts in the cottage. Maggie planted a winter garden with seeds Ella had given her, coaxing life from the desert soil. Cole recuperated fully from his wound, though he'd always carry the scar. They lived quietly, cautiously, but with a hope that grew stronger each day. The news came on a cold December morning. Marshal Walsh arrived at their door, a rare smile creasing his weathered face. It's done, he said simply, handing Cole an official document. Full pardon? Signed by the territorial governor, Cole Matthews. You're a free man. Cole stared at the paper, his hands trembling slightly. Maggie pressed close to his side, reading the formal language that erased 2 years of running. Your name has been cleared of all charges, restored to full rights of citizenship, a grievous injustice corrected. Additionally, Walsh continued, the court has awarded you compensation from Blackwood's estate. Not a fortune, but enough for a fresh start, Miss Thornton. Your father's property has been restored to you as well, along with damages for wrongful death. They were too overwhelmed to speak. Walsh understood, tipping his hat as he prepared to leave. You've done a brave thing, both of you. The territory is a cleaner place for it. Whatever you decide to do next, you've earned it. That night, they walked through Redemption Creek as snow began to fall. Rare for the desert, but not unheard of. The town looked almost magical under its white blanket. The harsh edges softened. They stopped at her father's grave, where Maggie laid a wreath of desert holly. It's finished, Papa, she whispered. Justice finally. They stood in the cemetery as snow swirled around them, each lost in thought. So much had changed since that terrible night at the fence post. Loss and fear had given way to love and possibility. The future, once a threatening shadow, now beckoned with promise. "What do we do now?" Maggie asked. Cole pulled her close. "Whatever we want. For the first time in years we can go anywhere. Be anything. That ranch you dreamed of. Maybe, or maybe something else. The world's wide open now." They were married 3 days later in the small church at the edge of town. Dutch and Martha came down from Silver City to witness, along with Marshal Walsh and a handful of others who'd come to know them during the trials. Maggie wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved in tissue. Cole wore a new suit, the first he'd owned that wasn't meant for running. The ceremony was simple, the words ancient and powerful. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, when Cole kissed her there at the altar with sunlight streaming through plain glass windows, Maggie felt the last chains of her old life fall away. The reception was held at the hotel, modest but joyful. Dutch told embarrassing stories about Cole. Martha fussed over Maggie like a mother hen. Even Walsh relaxed enough to share a drink and a rare laugh. As the sun set, painting the desert in shades of rose and gold, the newlyweds slipped away. They decided to stay in the cottage through winter, then make decisions come spring. That night, as Maggie lay in Cole's arms, listening to his steady heartbeat, she marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From death to life, from bondage to freedom, from solitude to union. "No regrets?" Cole asked softly. "Not one," she replied. "You? Only that it took so long to find you." Spring came early to the desert, painting the valleys with wild flowers. They rode out often, exploring the land they'd only seen as fugitives. On one such ride, they discovered a small valley tucked between red rock mesas with a spring-fed creek and good grazing land. "This is it," Cole said quietly. "This is the place." They used their compensation to buy the land and begin building. Not a grand ranch, but a solid start, a small house, a barn, corral for the horses they'd raise. Dutch's son came to help with construction along with others they'd met. The house rose from the desert floor like a promise made manifest. Ella visited when the house was complete, bringing herbs for Maggie's garden and blessings for their home. She walked through the rooms, nodding approval, then sat with them on the porch as evening painted the sky. "You have grown strong," she told Maggie. "Both of you, the trials you faced have forged you like steel and fire." "We had good teachers," Maggie replied, touching the medallion she still wore. "No," Ella said. "You had the wisdom to learn. Not everyone does." She stood to leave, then paused. "There will be new life here soon. I see it." Her knowing smile left them wondering at her meaning. By autumn, Ella's prediction proved true. Maggie was with child, a discovery that filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. Cole became almost comically protective until she threatened to tie him to a fence post if he didn't let her continue her daily work. They were gathering the last of the garden harvest when riders appeared on the horizon. Cole tensed, old instincts never fully fading, but Maggie recognized the lead rider. "It's Marshal Walsh," she said. The marshal had retired, his duty done, but he'd come to check on them. They sat on the porch sharing coffee and news. The last of Blackwood's associates had been convicted. William Harley was serving 20 years hard labor. The territory was cleaning up its act slowly but surely. "You two are part of that," Walsh said. "Your courage started something. Made people believe justice was possible." As he prepared to leave, he shook Cole's hand. "You've built something good here. Matthews, guard it well." "With my life," Cole replied, and meant it. Winter came gentle that year, the snow light and brief. On a clear night in February, with stars brilliant overhead, their child was born, a daughter with her mother's auburn hair and her father's steady gaze. They named her Hope, for that's what she represented. Dutch and Martha came to visit, bearing gifts and exclaiming over the baby. Friends from town followed. People who'd once shunned them, now offering congratulations. The house filled with laughter and life. So different from the loneliness both had known. One evening, as spring touched the desert again, Maggie found Cole standing by the corral watching the sunset. Hope slept in her arms. Peaceful and perfect. She joined him, leaning into his strength. "Penny, for your thoughts," she said. "Just remembering that night I found you. How close we came to never having this. But we did have it. We fought for it, earned it together," he said, echoing their old promise. "Always together." As the sun dipped below the mesas, painting the world in shades of fire, a thought struck Maggie. She smiled, thinking of the girl she'd been, frightened, trapped, certain her story was ending. How wrong she'd been. "What is it?" Cole asked, seeing her smile. "I was just thinking about something that night. Tied to the fence post. I heard you coming. The sound of your horse in the darkness. I thought it was death approaching. And instead she looked up at him. This man who'd appeared from nowhere to save her, who'd given her not just life, but a reason to live it fully. Instead, it was everything beginning. He kissed her, then soft and sweet as their daughter stirred between them. In the distance, coyotes began their evening song, but the sound held no fear now. They were home. They were safe. They were together. The desert stretched endless around them, harsh and beautiful by turns. But here in this valley they'd claimed. Love had taken root and bloomed against all odds. Through danger and doubt, they'd found their happy ending. Or perhaps, Maggie thought as she followed her husband inside their home, it wasn't an ending at all. Perhaps it was just the beginning of a longer, richer story, one they'd write together, day by day for all the years to come. The lamplight spilled golden from their windows as darkness settled over the land. Inside there was warmth and love and hope. Outside the vast desert kept its eternal watch. And somewhere between the two, in that space where wilderness meets civilization, where fear transforms to courage and loneliness to love, their story continued. Two souls who'd found each other in the darkest hour, who'd chosen love over safety, trust over fear. They'd been bound by ropes meant to kill, but had broken free to bind themselves with promises meant to last forever. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the trials they'd faced or the enemies they'd overcome, but the love they'd found and the life they'd built from it. The rest, as they say in the West, was just details. Under the endless stars of the desert sky, in a house built by their own hands, Cole and Maggie Matthews held their daughter and each other and knew they were exactly where they belonged. Thank you so much for joining me on this Wild West adventure. I hope Cole and Maggie's story touched your heart as much as it touched mine while telling it. Where are you listening to this story from? Please leave a comment below. I'd love to know whether you're in a bustling city, a quiet countryside, or perhaps somewhere in between. Don't forget to subscribe to the From Wild West channel for more tales of courage, love, and redemption in the American frontier. Share your thoughts about Cole and Maggie's journey. What moment moved you the most? Your comments mean the world to me and they help create our wonderful community of Western story lovers. Until our next adventure, partners.